Second thing is a very conservative senator from a western state.
Because you hang around with these guys.
Yeah, very, very conservative senator who is become more conservative in this environment. I've known him before, and not sure I know him now, but there's a very conservative senator. And I was talking to him very recently about the community services block grant, and he said, well, we've got to make all these cuts and tough choices and all that. And then his chief of staff was there, and he said, but Senator, do you know how often our office has to turn to this agency, this one particular agency in his largest city? It is on an almost hourly basis. Where are they going to go? What are we going to do? And the senator said, I had no idea that how we rely on these social service agencies.
The House members would tell you that's why it's good to have the People's House, because we're closer to the ground than a lot of the senators, and we see this every day.
Right.
But I think most Senate offices, at least up our way, I know our senators are involved in that. Some of the cuts, just looking through here, you said a $700 million program nationally. So you spread that out over about 1,100 different agencies working on that. The proposed cut was from $700 million, we were going to cut $305 million out minimally, and others went higher than that.
Correct.
Which leaves you, it's like 43% cut. That's huge. Again, in talking about what you're going to do now to staff up all of these uses and needs that people have on that.
It's worse than that. It was $305 million over 6 months.
Right. So it's like 4 years cuts over half a year.
So it basically, $405 million would have terminated the program. $305 puts it on life support with round-the-clock care.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at that. They wanted to cut 23.5% out of the home heating fuel. Northeast, that's critical. We're fighting all the time to get more money and to allow some of the reserve money to be cut out because our winter's been so severe. And we have seniors calling us. We have people that have lost their job calling us. It's important to people, and we need to do that. The Head Start program, they wanted to cut almost 15% out of that. And again, I somebody that deals a lot with education, can't tell you how ridiculous, penny smart and pound foolish that is. Where every witness that we've had, we had one panel one time that had everything from the ultra conservative to very, very liberal, from teachers and administrators at all levels of education to think tanks. And the one question that I asked all of them, if you had money to invest, where would you put that first dollar? 19 out of 19 said preschool, because that would have the biggest bang for the buck, and that would make the difference on that.
Well, clearly a budget in the spending bills that it spawns or creates, enables, defines us as a country, as a society, how we invest the federal resources in partnership with state and local resources are what this country is all about. And I think whether you're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, we are in an environment right now that the role of government, what are our priorities, what should we invest in, are being debated. That's exciting.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind that. I think we should have that debate. I think what troubles me is when people say, well, we just have to cut the numbers in the abstract and we can't be concerned about the consequences. I think the debate we need to have is what are the consequences, so we can decide what are the priorities in cutting and what are the priorities in not cutting. I don't know if you saw recently that 60 Minutes had a show on, and they had 3 segments. The first segment was about a woman who had a global charity where she brought in kids who had lost limbs and scarred faces, was fixing them over. She ran it out of her walk-in closet at her house, and she ran it on a shoestring. The second segment was about a basketball coach who took inner-city kids, and they all went on to college. He built character as well as sports skills, had many opportunities to go up to higher-paying jobs with more attention, and turned them all down. The third segment was about one of our corporate executives in a multinational who was talking about how they were avoiding their taxes and how they were taking advantage of every loophole or so-called tax expenditure in the code to go overseas and not have to pay their share. So while they complain about a 35% corporate tax rate being too high compared to other nations, the effective rate of some of these corporations is about 2.4%. Some pay nothing. So, I think we have to look at the whole budget, tax expenditures included, and now we can have a conversation. We don't have to cut so radically into programs. We have to cut. It's going to be painful enough, but you don't have to cut so radically in if you look at the whole budget, including those tax expenditures.
I don't know anyone involved, particularly in low-income programs, workforce programs, that isn't open to doing business better, for suggestions of ways to improve efficiency, results, transparency, accountability. open to all those suggestions. And I find that true on many things, many activities that the federal government invests in. What I worry about is what you've pointed out, is that the focus of balancing the budget or getting us on a path, a theoretical path to fiscal balance, is all focused right now on that 12% of the budget that's the domestic discretionary. And it seems to me in this environment, one has to look at certainly whether it's defense, whether it's revenues, whether it's entitlements. Everything ought to be examined in this environment.
Exactly. And, you know, what I try to note to people is if you look at the economists, the so-called experts on this, the whole spectrum, everybody from Mark Zandi, who's with Moody.com, who's John McCain's advisor in economics, all the way to Paul Krugman, who's progressive and writes in the New York Times, they don't disagree right now that, you know, we have to make reasonable, targeted cuts where appropriate. But right now it's about getting people back to work. It's about jobs. It's about sustaining people and sustaining communities so we can have some economic growth. And if people aren't working, if your economy's not growing, how are you ever going to pay down that deficit? So we have to get that part right so that we can, when employment comes to the right point and the economy's growing or whatever, we can make those better decisions or more difficult decisions about cutting on that. So we need to have this discussion, and I'm glad, in a sense, as I said, that we're having the discussion. I would like it to focus more on the consequences so that people knew and made a conscious decision to cut or not cut. We'll have disagreements about that, and that's to be expected. But at least if we're all talking about the same notion of knowing what's at stake when you make a cut as opposed to just theoretically lopping off numbers, then I think that's an unhealthy exercise on that, particularly if you narrow it down to just that one section.
Well, the one program that I'm involved with quite a bit is the Community Services Block Grant, the Community Action Agencies it funds. There's 600,000 families in Massachusetts that turn to these agencies.
Right.
A loss of funding puts 4,000 people out of work and denies communities tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue, additional non-federal resources they would have brought in. So it is a classic case of perhaps penny wise, pound foolish in terms of the deep cuts that they're proposing and its immediate impact, negative impact on the economy.
Well, you know, I hope this discussion is sort of crystallized for a lot of folks that are viewing, you know, some of the considerations that are being made and how important this discussion is in terms of identifying our values and making sure we go about our budget business in the right way. It's going to heat up in the next days and week ahead. We need to hopefully have this conversation and focus on priorities. We're certainly hoping that the government doesn't shut down or even come remotely close to that. And I want to thank you for your help in having us discuss all of that in this program today. Time went by quickly. We look forward to having you as a guest again. Thank you.
Well, I wish you luck in some tough decisions, not only for your district and the state of Massachusetts, but for the nation as well.
Thanks.